Prayer by John Bunyan. Chapter 1. What True Prayer Is. Prayer is a sincere, sensible, affectionate pouring out of the heart or soul to God, through Christ, in the strength and assistance of the Holy Spirit, for such things as God has promised, or according to His word, for the good of the church, with submission and faith to the will of God. In this description there are these 7 things. Prayer is 1. A sincere, 2. A sensible, 3. An affectionate pouring out of the soul to God through Christ, 4. By the strength or assistance of the Spirit, 5. For such things as God has promised, or according to His word, 6. For the good of the church, 7. With submission in faith to the will of God. Part 1. For the first of these, it is a sincere pouring out of the soul to God. Sincerity is such a grace as runs through all the graces of God in us, and through all the actings of a Christian, and has a sway in them too, or else their actings are not regarded of God. David speaks particularly of sincerity when he mentions prayer. Quote, I cried unto him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. Psalms chapter 66, verse 17 and 18. Part of the exercise of prayer is sincerity, without which God does not accept it as prayer. Psalm chapter 16, 1 through 4. Quote, Ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 12 and 13. The want of this made the Lord reject the prayers of those mentioned in Hosea 7:14, where he says, quote, They have not cried unto me with their heart. That is in sincerity, quote, when they howled upon their beds. It is rather for a pretense, for a show and hypocrisy, to be seen of men and applauded for the same, that they pray. Sincerity was that which Christ commended in Nathanael, when he was under the fig tree, quote, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. John chapter 1, verse 47. Probably this good man was pouring out his soul to God in prayer under the fig tree, and that in a sincere and unfeigned spirit before the Lord. The prayer that has this in it as one of the principal ingredients is the prayer that God regards. Thus, quote, The prayer of the upright is his delight. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 8. And why must sincerity be one of the essentials of prayer which is accepted of God? Because sincerity carries the soul in all simplicity to open its heart to God, and to tell Him the case plainly without equivocation, to condemn itself plainly without dissembling, to cry to God heartily without complimenting. Quote, I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself thus, Thou hast chastised me, and I was chastised, as a bullock unaccustomed to the yoke. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 18. Sincerity is the same in a corner alone, as it is before the face of the world. It knows not how to wear 2 masks, one for an appearance before men, and another for private use. It must have God, and be with Him in the duty of prayer. It is not a lip labor that it regards for sincerity, like God, looks at the heart, and that is where prayer comes from, if it be true prayer. Part 2. It is a sincere and sensible pouring out of the heart or soul. It is not, as many take it to be, a few babbling, prating, complimentary expressions, but a sensible feeling in the heart. Prayer has in it a sensibleness of diverse things, sometimes sense of sin, sometimes of mercy received, sometimes of the readiness of God to give mercy. Section 1. A sense of the want of mercy, by reason of the danger of sin. The soul, I say, feels, and from feeling sighs, groans, and breaks at the heart. For right prayer bubbles out of the heart when it is overcome with grief and bitterness, as blood is forced out of the flesh by reason of some heavy burden that lies upon it. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10. Psalms chapter 69, verse 3. David roars, cries, weeps, faints at heart, fails at the eyes, loses his moisture. Psalms chapter 38, verses 8 through 10. Hezekiah mourns like a dove. Isaiah 38, verse 14. Ephraim bemoans himself. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 18. Peter weeps bitterly. Matthew 26, verse 75. Christ has strong cryings and tears. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7. And all this from a sense of the justice of God, the guilt of sin, the pains of hell, and destruction. Quote, "The sorrows of death compassed me, and the pains of hell gat hold upon me. I found trouble and sorrow. Then called I upon the name of the Lord." Psalm chapter 116, verse 3 and 4. And in another place, quote, "My sore ran in the night." Psalm chapter 77, verse 2. Again, quote, "I am bowed down greatly. I go mourning all the day long." Psalm chapter 38, verse 6. In all these instances you may see that prayer carries in it a sensible feeling, and that first from a sense of sin. Section 2. Sometimes there is a sweet sense of mercy received, encouraging, comforting, strengthening, enlivening, enlightening mercy. Thus David pours out his soul to bless and praise and admire the great God for his loving kindness to such poor vile wretches. Quote, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with the loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like eagles." Psalms chapter 103, verses 1 through 4. And thus is the prayer of saints sometimes turned into praise and thanksgiving, and yet is still prayer. This is a mystery. God's people pray with their praises, as it is written, quote, "Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication and thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto God." Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. A sensible thanksgiving for mercies received is a mighty prayer in the sight of God. It prevails with him unspeakably. Section 3. In prayer there is sometimes in the soul a sense of mercy to be received. This again sets the soul aflame. Quote, "Thou, O Lord of hosts," says David, "hast revealed to thy servant, saying, I will build thee an house. Therefore hath thy servant found in his heart to pray unto thee." 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 27. This provoked Jacob, David, Daniel, with others, not by fits and starts, not yet in a foolish, frothy way, but mightily, fervently, and continually to groan out their conditions before the Lord, as being sensible of their wants, their misery, and the willingness of God to show mercy. Genesis chapter 32, verses 10 and 11. Daniel chapter 9, verses 3 and 4. Part 3. Prayer is a sincere, sensible, and affectionate pouring out of the soul to God. Section 1. Oh, what heat, strength, life, vigor, and affection there is in true prayer! As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. Psalm chapter 42, verse 1. Quote, "I have longed after thy precepts." Psalm chapter 119, verse 40. Quote, "I have longed for thy salvation." Psalm chapter 17, verse 4. Quote, "My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God." Psalm chapter 84, verse 2. Quote, "My soul breaketh for the longing that it hath unto thy judgments at all times." Psalm chapter 119, verse 20. Oh, what affection is here discovered in prayer! You have the same in Daniel. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do defer not for thine own sake, O my God. Daniel chapter 9, verse 19. Every syllable carries a mighty vehemency in it. This is called the fervent or the working prayer by James. And so again, quote, and being in an agony he prayed more earnestly. Luke chapter 22, verse 44. He had his affections more and more drawn out after God for his helping hand. Oh, how wide are the most of men with their prayers from this prayer! Alas, the greatest part of men make no conscience at all of the duty, and as for them that do, it is to be feared that many of them are very great strangers to a sincere and sensible